Hi, welcome to the sashing video. This is my 6-inch blocks. I'm making a tote and I have stitched up all 6 blocks to start with, and I'm doing the black and white with splashes of red, which I love. So I want to show you the back because the tote does not get the standard backing. Like we have the regular block. This is my 5-inch for the octagon centerpiece, and I put a pretty backing on it, and that's great because I want it to be reversible. The tote will not be reversible. Not only that, the tote needs body. I've made totes before, and one in particular, just quickly show you this one because it has terrific body. I've used it for about 3 years now. Can you see, like, it's really firm? It has pockets and whatnot inside. That's not what I'm showing you. What I'm showing you is the body. And the reason I'm showing you that is if you want a tote that you could just roll up in a ball and throw in your bag and take along with you, that's fine. But if you want a tote that you can, just have it, keep it shaped real well, you need to have some firm body. So we're using the flex foam on the lining. We'll get to that part later. What I have done for right now, and you could get away with this, I found out. I didn't know, I know this is pretty stiff interfacing. I used to use this for when I did my custom wedding gowns. I would make a little clutch bag for the bridesmaids, and I used this. Can you hear it? It's pretty full of body here. I got this ginormous roll of it at a fabric shop I used to frequent, and I really can't tell you what the name of it is, but it's a very heavy duty interfacing. I used 2 pieces on the back. So I have my front with my 1 layer of thin batting, and on the back I just put 2 layers of this interfacing, and this is like really stiff. I could probably pick up my wine glass. Let's test it. Ta-da! It's stiff, but it doesn't, it's body kind of stiff. It's not stiff like a board, like it bends easily, but it retains its shape, and that's what you want. So I've used 2 pieces of this heavy duty interfacing. Now, you can do that and use just a regular lining, or you can use a flex foam without this or with this. I'm using the flex foam and this. I really want a sturdy bag. Okay, so that was number 1 I wanted to show you. The next thing I wanted to show you is all of my 6-inch blocks have been cut to 8-inch square, and then I stitched it. So, I centered everything so I'd have the same amount of space in general, as close as possible on each side. And then before you add your sashing, which will be my cute little red and white polka dots, before you add your sashing, you're going to square off your blocks. So I'm going to use sashing that is 1 layer, not your typical sashing. This is sort of quilt as you go, but the thing is, I'm not using the backing, so I don't need sashing on the back. So what I'm going to do is square it off, take a 1/2-inch seam because I like the wide sashing. You could do this with a 1/4 or a 1/2, whatever you like. I happen to like the wide sashing. So I'm going to take a 1/2 on the other side, have a 1-inch sashing, but I'm going to put it right next to the line. And I'll tell you right now, it's more difficult to get it perfectly lined up on that line. It's like putting an invisible zipper in. You have to be real meticulous about getting that nice and straight for it to look good. The easiest way is to allow yourself about a 1/2 inch space and then put your sashing on. So if you do it that way, you know, you don't have that lining up thing to do. The reason I'm lining it up with that to keep it smaller is because this bag with 6-inch squares, we already have 12 inches across plus the sashing on both sides. And the sides are also 6-inch squares. You can't put a 6-inch front with a 5-inch side. It just wouldn't all line up. So now we have 6-inch sides, which, you know, are going to be pretty wide. So I didn't want to make it any wider. And that's why I'm going with right up against the satin outline there. I could also choose to use a 1/2-inch sashing, but I didn't care for it. And I'll show you that. If I used a 1/2-inch sashing, it would be, let's just fold that back, put this in here. And then we got 1/2-inch sashing. It's going to be a real skinny little line. For me, I don't care for that as much. I like the wider sashing. So I'm going to do wider sashing, but butt it up against the line. So now what we want to do is square off our blocks. We started with a 6-inch square. We need 1/2-inch for the sashing. And you know, that's up to you if you want to use 1/4-inch seams, if you want to use 1/2-inch finish or 1-inch finish. You have to decide what you want to use. If you're going to do a 1-inch finish up against the satin with a 1/2-inch seam, this is what you'll do next. You're going to need 1/2-inch on each side. And now that's 1/2-inch from the end of the satin. Let me use this so I can tell you. 1/2-inch from here. It's not 1/2-inch from here. It's 1/2-inch from the very edge of that stitching. Okay? So you're going to get your little ruler, 1/2-inch, this little orange part down here at the bottom. That's 1/2 inch. So we got 1/2 down there. And it's right up against the edge. We got 1/2-inch on the other side. And it's hard to see the black lines on the black fabric, but you know, you can figure it out. And then you get your straight edge, because that's the best way to get a nice, neat line. And I'm going to cut that very carefully at the 1/2-inch mark, okay? Oop, it moved. Let's get that back in place. Okay, 1/2. Those black lines are real hard to see. Okay. Okay. So there's a 1/2 there. I'm going to get my little turntable. It'll be a lot easier to do this. Okay. And we'll line it up again at 1/2-inch. And make sure that, you know, you want to make sure this edge and this edge are both 1/2 inch to keep it nice and square. Even though it may look like 1/2-inch here, if this edge is not totally lined up at the 1/2-inch mark, then you might wind up with a square that's not quite square. You know, it might be a little bit off. So, you know, this is one of the most important things you'll do in your finishing. Once you get this done, the rest of it will be a lot easier, because you will have everything in place. You won't have to worry about, did you get it the right size? Everything's been pre-cut, pre-measured, pre-everything. So we got your 1/2-inches all around. Again, 1/2-inch square, 1/2-inch. Those black lines are a bugger. Okay. And we'll do one more side. Now, when we're done this, I'm going to show you the sashing, and there's a little trick to connecting your pieces, because you won't be able to get one piece of sashing that will completely cover the entire piece. So the let's get that. Okay, so all of my squares will be cut exactly like that. Then I'll put my sashing on and we'll be good to go. I'll finish them up later. Here's what I wanted to show you. I've already cut some sashing. I put the SF101 interfacing on my sashing. I don't normally do this, but I'm only using one piece on top. I'm not using the back sashing. And it is for a tote. I want it all to be more sturdy than normal. So I did put the interfacing on. And here's a piece that I have already connected. I'm going to show you that because you're going to wind up with lots of pieces that you want to connect. For those of you who haven't done a lot of sewing, you know, this is just a handy little way of putting it together and making it nice and neat and flat without the bulk. When you're connecting your seam, you want to do it like this. One piece this way, one piece this way. And then, you know, if you really need to put a line, go ahead and put yourself a line in there. Make yourself a line from that point to the other point. Let's see if I can find a pencil, a marker. Give yourself a line. Okay. Now you have no worries about, did I do that right? Where do I stitch it? You want to mark them all. You got this one done. Now you can go ahead and add the other pieces and stitch everything at once. Now what happens is when you're done, it will be stitched right here. That's the line. Okay, so it's going to be stitched there. And when you open it, you'll have one piece of straight sashing straight across. And what happens with this, why it's so nice, is because you're going to trim that bulk off, and your seam allowance will be up here and down here. If you went ahead and did it, say you did a line this way, straight across here, and then when you open it up, you have all your seam allowance straight across, and it doesn't look nearly as good. So this is just a nice way of putting your sashing together, binding, all that. Now, Carol had mentioned that she likes to use bias binding because she likes it. And I understand her reasoning, but in this particular case, everything is squared off. We got a lot of straight lines. So it's not necessary to cut it on the bias, which does take a lot more fabric if you do it that way, because you have to cut everything across. So I'm just going to use all straight on this, because when you put these blocks together, you're going to have straight edge at the bottom. You're going to have a straight edge at the other side. You're going to have let me move you over, make sure you're in camera view. You are going to have a 1/2 inch triangular block in here of some sort, but it's still going to be straight. So this is straight, this is straight, this is straight. Now, if you were doing a rounded piece, a truly round piece, I would definitely tell you to do it on a bias. And that's where Carol would do hers, on the bias. But we don't necessarily have to do that. If you would prefer bias, go ahead. You know, this is your project. You do it the way that you're most comfortable doing it. But for those who have never done this before, it's a lot easier to work with straight fabric, not bias. It's a lot easier to work with the fabric if you have put the lining on first. What I did is I fused the Shape Flex SF101 to the back of a large piece, and then I cut it into strips. That's about it for the sashing. What we're going to do, once I get, actually this, let's assume this one is also cut. The way I'm going to put my sashing on is 1/2 inch seam here. I'm going to use a zipper foot because I want to butt that right up against that satin. So there'll be a 1/2 inch seam there. And then when that's finished, now just stick a few pins in, give you a general idea. I will show you the next part as well. But now you got your sashing on here, right? So the next part, you want to lay this out flat. Put your piece here. Do another 1/2 inch seam. Flip it over. It would be about there. And that's what you'll wind up with. Of course, they're going to be even because you're going to start this at the same edge. Like this one starts at the top. This one will start at the top. They will both start in exactly the same place and end in exactly the same place. So that way you know that you have the same length on this side and on this side. I haven't cut this yet, so it's a little bit more difficult to show you that part. I'm going to go ahead and start stitching these together, and I'll be back to show you more when I'm finished. Okay, I've done the first seam. You can see I have laid it down right against the satin edging, 1/2 inch seam, and I found this super cool foot that has this little edge on it that goes right against the satin, so it really helps me to keep a nice tight edge. Now I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to put this piece next, and it will go here. And I'm going to start at the top so I know that my length is the same on both pieces. So that will be matched up 1/2 inch there. That would be my next seam. One thing I forgot to mention, and I should have mentioned much sooner than this, is your sashing is cut at 2 1/4 inches. 2 1/8 inches, either way, but make sure you cut them all the same. If you go with 2 1/8 or 2 1/4, make sure it's the same throughout. And there's a reason for that. This is, you know, you have a lot of thickness here, so you have the seam here. When you fold it, it takes up a little bit more than just the 1/2 inch seam. It takes a little bit extra. Over here, it takes a little bit extra. So even though you have a 1 inch finish, and you could see that foot, I love that foot. I don't even know. When I got my machine, I ordered every foot I could find just so I'd have them all. But you can see how nice, look how close it is to the edging. It's like, it's really perfect. Yeah, it's really perfect. I'm looking at it and darn, I like it. Now, the thing is, this takes 1 inch. You have a 1/2 inch seam here and a 1/2 inch seam here, which is another 1 inch. That's 2 inches. So when you fold it, you're going to need a little bit more than 2 inches. So I would suggest 2 1/8, or, you know, if you really want to be safe, 2 1/4 inch wide on the sashing. So that's what I did here. I think I went like a little bit. Yeah, there it is. It's 2. I did 2 1/4, and it worked out really well for me. So I'll be back. Okay, I've done the first part. This will be my front. This is my one side. Now the sides will be stitched, you know, the sashing will be stitched right across. So when you have your tote done, this will be standing up on the side. Now the front is a little different. We're going to do these two together, just the straight part, and then you're going to put together the long centerpiece. So it will go this way. When you're done, you'll have the centerpiece here. Then the front is finished. Then you'll do the back the same way as this, all 4 pieces, in whatever order you prefer. I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the back will be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, just so you can kind of read around the tote. But, you know, whatever order makes sense to you, that's what you should be doing. And once you finish this side, this front, let's say we have this piece on here. It's all sashed up. Wish it was this easy. I actually ripped this out twice because I put my blocks upside down. When you stitch these together, when you do your sashing, you're going to be flipping this one backwards, so you don't really see kind of what you're doing. Make sure they're both going in the same direction. Don't be like me. Twice I ripped it out. I ripped it out, did it again, and I had to rip it out again. Not good. So then when we're all done this, you got your front done, you got one side done, and then we'll do the long piece for this side. Now, you could do this any way you like, but if you're new at this and you're just following what I'm doing, then this is how I'm doing it. And I'm just doing it this way because I'm looking for the way that looks best. And this looked good to me. So I wish I could hold this down flat so you could actually have a good view of it. Whoops, that didn't help. So this is how it's going to look when it's finished. I hope this makes sense to you. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this together. I hope it makes sense to me. I'm going to stitch it together and I'll be back to show you the results. Now I'm only going to do this and this. When we're all finished that, for the bottom, after we have all the 12 blocks done, we're going to put a piece of sashing single, just like this. Now I have to look at it and see. I might want to add some length to this because this will be attached to the rectangular piece that will be the bottom of your bag, your tote. So we'll get to that. I'm going to play around with that and see what I like best on that. I might want to lengthen the front a little bit because this feels like a short tote to me. I'm used to my totes being tall and not as wide. But, it might just be perfect. We'll just have to wait and see as we go along. I'll be back. So I thought this was important to show you this. I am having a bit of a problem when I put this on and flip it over. These lines are not matching up perfectly, and I want them to be perfect. So just to give you a heads up on that, I wanted to show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it, line it up here, make sure my tops are the same. See, somehow my top and bottom wasn't cut exactly the same, I guess. But you want these two satin lines to be perfectly lined up. And once you have them perfectly lined up, you can pin it, clip it, so you know where to start the top of your stitching. I laid it out and I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't stitch it, so I did not have to rip it out, which is very fortunate. But make sure you have a good line here, because if you have one, when you're done, if one's down here and the other's up there, it's going to look crappy. You really want this to be lined up better than that. I mean, if you're not perfect, I think it's, this is a side, this is a front, so it won't matter. But you really want to get this as close as you possibly can in the lines. Even if you have to make a mark with one of those air erasable markers or something, which I have here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make myself a little mark here. Not with this. I think this one is my air erasable. So I'll make myself a mark here. And then I know that's where my satin will have to end. And this, or, where my sashing will end on my satin. And then this is where my sashing will begin on the next satin. So I have two little marks there, which will help me when I stitch this all together. I'm going to stitch it together now, but I wanted you to be aware that, that's a little bit of a tricky thing to do. So, take your time, get it right. You could do this. I promise you could do this. It's just a question of getting it lined up. I've already put together this piece, which I love. Looks great. I'm happy with it. Now I'm going to put this together, and that will be half of my tote finished. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, let me just say one thing. Don't be afraid to go over your seam twice. I've stitched several of my seams twice. After I stitch it, if it's not close enough to the satin, I'll just go over it again and stitch it a touch closer next time. But I'm happy with the final. Well, I got a little bit of white showing right here. I'll go over that and I'll get that tucked in there. I don't want any of that white showing, especially with white and black. It really, you know, if there's an edge showing like that, it really shows up. So this is the first half of the tote finished. This will be the side. And I'm going to fold this and put, let's see if I have something rectangular here to show you. I'll just take a piece of paper. So my bottom will be something like this. It's going to be a rectangular piece that will fit on the bottom right here. This piece of paper, you know, just ignore that. But this sashing on the side will not be around the side because I don't want really wide sides. I want to minimize the sides. So what I'm going to do is fold all that toward the front. And when I put my rectangular piece on, this will be in the front and attached to the rectangular piece this way. And it'll make better sense as we go along and I show you the rest of the video. For now, I'm going to post this video so you can get started. I want to see your projects. You can all do this. This is not difficult at all. It takes a little bit of time because you have to line it up. You have to make sure you get close to your edges, you know, all that little nitpicky stuff. But that's okay. Nothing is going to be perfect. But in the end, you're going to have a beautiful, oh man, it's going to be so pretty. You're going to have a beautiful tote, and this is, can you see it standing up, or am I out of the camera view? Let me see if I can get that into the camera view. Whoop. Let's see. It's hard to get it standing up and show you the whole view of it, but this is going to be my tote, and I'm super happy with it. I think it's going to be great. I love the black and white. I love the red splashes of color in there. And now I want to see what you've done. I know you guys have some fantastic color combinations going on because I've seen some of them that were really stunning. So I want to see more. Show me what you got. Enjoy the video, and I hope it's helpful.